I used to think I knew the man who slept beside me for 8 years. I used to believe our marriage was not perfect, but real enough to last. We were not rich, we did not take luxurious trips. We did not have candle-lit dinners like in the movies, but we had a house with the lights on every evening, the sound of the washing machine spinning in the corner of the kitchen, a bill payment schedule taped to the refrigerator door, 2 cups set side by side every morning, his shirts hanging beside my dresses in the same closet. I once thought that after loving each other for long enough, marriage was simply this: quiet, steady, tiring sometimes, cold sometimes, but still a home. Until the day Facebook pushed a friend's suggestion onto my screen. A strange woman, carrying my husband's last name. And in her profile picture, behind her peaceful smile, was the face of the man I waited for every night to walk back through our front door. That was when I understood something terrifying. Sometimes betrayal does not begin with lipstick on a collar, does not begin with secret messages, or the scent of another woman's perfume. It begins with an algorithm, and it ends with a man losing everything he lied to keep. My 8 years of marriage, from the outside, looked like the kind people nod at and call stable. I was 35, working as an accountant for a furniture company, my life revolving around balance sheets, spending notebooks, vegetables from the market, and evenings spent watching television without remembering what I had watched. My husband, Hong, was 4 years older than me, and worked as a regional manager for a construction equipment distribution company. His job had him traveling constantly, trips that lasted 3 days, 5 days, sometimes a week. I used to complain about it when we were newly married, but in time, like with most things, I got used to it. People get used to loneliness very easily when it repeats itself long enough. Hong knew how to soften it. Every time he came home, he brought me a little gift: a box of cakes from Da Nang, a silk scarf from Hanoi, a tiny succulent from some roadside stop. He would often wrap his arms around me from behind while I was cooking and say, in that tired but gentle voice, "Just a few more years, babe. Once I'm more settled, things will be easier for us." I believed that sentence for years. I was not the kind of woman who liked checking her husband's phone, and I certainly was not the type to scream, interrogate, or invent scenes. I grew up in a family where my mother always taught me that if I wanted to keep a home, I had to know how to trust. She used to say men already came home exhausted from earning money, so do not turn yourself into the police waiting at the door. I listened. I lived by that. Maybe that was why Hong managed to betray me for so long. If you ask me honestly whether there were signs, the answer is yes. They just were not obvious enough when each one stood alone. They were tiny things, so tiny that even gathered together, you could still lie to yourself and call them coincidence. Like Hong having 2 phones. One was for work, which was normal enough. But as time went on, that phone almost never left his hand. Once he took it into the bathroom with him, and I laughed, asking, "Is your company collapsing or something? Why is it so urgent?" He just smiled and said, "Difficult clients." Or the way his work trips started falling on weekends more often than before. I used to find that strange because his company rarely sent him away on weekends. But he said it was because the market was expanding and he had to take care of new partners. Or how he suddenly started caring more about his appearance, buying new cologne, changing his haircut, going to the gym. A middle-aged man wanting to look after himself better should have been a good thing. But I still remember once seeing him standing in front of the mirror adjusting the collar of his shirt. And for one brief second, I had the strange feeling that he was not doing it for himself. But I brushed it aside, because if you choose to suspect every small thing in a marriage, you will live like you are sitting on a chair full of nails. I chose to trust, not because I was naive, but because trust was easier to survive inside. We did not have children. That was the quiet ache I never said out loud. The first 2 years, we were not in a hurry. The next 2, we began to hope. And the 3 after that, hope turned into tests, supplements, doctor appointments, and uncomfortable questions from relatives every Lunar New Year. The doctor said I was not the only reason, that he had some issues too, but no one ever used the word infertility. They softened it into phrases like lower chances, more intervention may help, don't put too much pressure on yourselves. Back then, Hong held me and said it did not matter, that even without children we could still live well together. I knew he said that to comfort me. And because at the time, I truly believed he loved me more than he longed to become a father. Now, looking back, I do not know whether that sentence was kindness or cruelty, because while I was quietly grieving the emptiness in this house, he had gone and built another home somewhere else, one filled with children's voices. I do not know what he felt in all those years, when he saw me go silent in front of the baby clothes aisle at the supermarket. Pity, guilt, or just another performance he had grown very skilled at. The day everything began slipping out of orbit was a Tuesday evening. Hong was away on a business trip in Haiphong, or at least that was what he said. I had dinner alone, cleaned the kitchen, and sat down to scroll mindlessly through Facebook the way lonely women often do just to kill time. The screen showed the people you may know section. At first, I paid it no attention. A few people from my hometown, a few old clients, a few unfamiliar faces. Then I froze. A woman named Lin Vu. What caught my attention first was not whether she was pretty. It was her cover photo. A small birthday party, green balloons, a cake shaped like a train, two children grinning brightly. And behind them, leaning in to light the candles, was a man. Even from that side angle, seeing only half his face, my blood ran cold. The jawline, the nose, the hair, the shoulders. I stared at it, telling myself it could not be. I clicked into her profile picture, a woman in her early 30s, soft-looking, wearing a beige dress, holding a little girl of about 5. Both of them had that natural kind of smile that only appears when the person behind the camera is someone you love. I scrolled down a little more. Another family picture appeared, this time clearer. The man stood behind the children, his hand resting on the older boy's shoulder. Sunlight came in from the left, leaving his face slightly shadowed, but not enough to mistake him. It was Hong. I do not remember how long I sat there without moving. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 30. There was no scream in my head, no dramatic cracking sound like in the movies, just a blank white silence, as if my brain refused to process what my eyes had already seen. I zoomed in on the picture. My eyes ran over every detail like a woman possessed. The navy polo shirt I had washed before, the brown leather watch I had given him for our 7th anniversary, the mole near his left ear. There was no room left for denial. I kept scrolling through Lin's page. Many of her posts were public, photos of her son's birthday, family beach trips, Tet celebrations, the kids in kindergarten uniform, and scattered through all of it, like carefully hidden knife wounds, were images of my husband. Not every photo showed his face clearly. In some, it was just a shoulder, a hand, the back of his head, a pair of shoes. But a woman can recognize the man she loves from the way he stands. I recognized all of it. My heart pounded so hard, my hands were shaking too much to hold my phone steady. I took screenshots of every picture and emailed them to myself on instinct. I still did not cry. Not yet, maybe because the pain was too big, and my body delayed the reaction to survive. I sat there and started reading each post like an investigator, forced to examine the case file of her own life. One caption read, "Dad finally made it back in time for our son's birthday. Seeing the kids smile makes all the waiting worth it." Posted 8 months ago. I remembered that exact day. Hong had said he was stuck in Quang Ninh and could not make it home for dinner with me. I had eaten alone and texted to ask whether he was tired. Another post said, "Family is the most peaceful place in the world." It was posted under a photo of the 4 of them at the beach. That was the same weekend I had been home alone with a fever, while my husband called to say he was at a work site with poor signal. Another photo showed a small Christmas tree in an apartment, captioned, "This year we're all here." That was Christmas Eve last year, the night I went out with a friend because my husband claimed he had to entertain clients from central Vietnam. Piece by piece, memories inside me started rearranging themselves, locking into a picture so ugly that before then I had refused to see it. I went to Hong's Facebook page. Of course, there was nothing unusual. He rarely posted anything, mostly shared business articles and football news, sometimes a coffee photo with partners. But in his friends list, I found Lin. Barely any public interaction. Too careful, too neat, a kind of caution that does not come from a new affair, but from a lie that has been lived long enough to become routine. I went back through our messenger thread. "I'm busy. I'm going to bed early. I'll be in meetings all day tomorrow." Those words suddenly looked like evidence. I felt sick. I opened the photo album on my phone and compared Lin's pictures to the dates he had said he was away for work. I recognized that shirt, that pair of shoes, that leather bracelet, the same man, the same life. But he had split it in half and handed it to 2 women as if he were assigning tasks in a calendar. That night I barely slept. Hong video called me around 11. I looked at his face on the screen, listened to him talk about meetings, difficult partners, the long day ahead, and what hurt me most was not that he had another woman. What hurt most was how smoothly he lied. He asked why I looked so tired. I said I had a headache. He told me to take medicine and sleep early. in such a caring voice that if I had not seen those photos the night before, I probably would have been moved by it. After the call ended, I sat staring at my reflection in the glass door. The woman staring back at me had dark circles under her eyes, loosely tied hair, pale lips, and looked much older than she had that afternoon. I wanted to get in my car and drive somewhere. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call my mother, my best friend, anyone. I wanted to do something violent enough to dull the feeling that my chest had been ripped in two. But I did nothing. I opened a new notebook and started writing down dates. If he had lived 2 lives like a strategy, then I needed to be calmer than he was. That was the night my pain began hardening into something else. Resolve. The next morning, I still went to work. I still made coffee, pinned on my employee badge, checked invoices, answered emails as usual. No one noticed anything except that I was quieter. Around noon, I left early claiming I was not feeling well. Back home, I opened my laptop and began tracing whatever I could. Lynn's Facebook revealed more than she probably realized. She posted a photo of her son starting school at a private kindergarten in Long Bayen district. She had a balcony picture with a distinct building visible in the distance. She had checked in at a pho shop near a lake. I wrote down each location. Then I opened Google Maps, zoomed in and out, compared images, cross-referenced everything. I felt like a different version of myself. Colder, sharper, more frightening. I am not some brilliant woman, but a woman who has been betrayed can notice details no one else would ever care about. A sticker on a glass door, the color of an apartment hallway wall, the elevator signage. By late afternoon, I had narrowed it down to 3 likely residential complexes. That evening, Hong came home. He walked in carrying a gift bag. The smell of some unfamiliar cologne mixed with the smell of motorbike fumes from outside. He hugged me the way he always did. I stood still. He asked, "Why are you being so distant?" I looked up at him, trying to see whether there was any trace of fear in his eyes. There was none, only the careful warmth of a long-married husband. I smiled faintly and said I was just tired. Dinner that night was my first test. I put food on his plate, asked how the trip had gone, and he spun out a whole story about a distributor, a client, a drinking session. He gave just enough detail to sound honest, and just enough vagueness to make nothing verifiable. When he went to shower, I quietly opened his suitcase. A few clothes, some documents, a gas receipt, a parking ticket in Hai Duong. I was nearly ready to believe I was becoming paranoid when I found, tucked inside the inner pocket of his jacket, a receipt for children's toys. 2 items, a toy car model and a blonde doll, purchased 2 days earlier. There was no child in our life who would need gifts like that. I put the receipt down and sat on the floor of the dressing room, and finally I cried. Not loudly, just tears streaming soundlessly, because my body had finally accepted what my mind had known since the night before. My husband had children with another woman. Not 1 child, 2. Over the next 3 days, I lived like a woman playing 2 roles. By day, I was a normal wife. At night, I was a shadow following him. I started paying attention to Hong's habits. He often answered calls and stepped out onto the balcony. Some nights he came back inside looking softer somehow. I imagined there must have been children's voices on the other end of the line, calling him dad. One night long after midnight, his phone vibrated. He jolted awake, silenced it quickly, and went into the bathroom. I pressed my face into the pillow, my hands clenched so tightly they hurt. The man breathing beside me, turning over beside me, belonged to another home in a way even deeper than he belonged to mine. I began checking banking records whenever he carelessly left his laptop open. There were regular monthly transfers to an account under a woman's name. Not huge amounts, labeled as support. If I had not known anything, I would have thought it was repayment to an acquaintance. But when I totaled those transfers across 3 years, the number made my throat tight. Part of the money I had worked for alongside him. Part of the money I had saved by cutting corners, saying no to things I wanted, postponing trips had been flowing into another household. I remember once asking to renovate our kitchen because the cabinets were already worn down, and Hong said we should wait, that we needed to save in case of unexpected risks. It turned out those risks had a name, a face, and 2 children. I decided I had to see it with my own eyes. That Saturday morning, Hong said he was meeting a client in Bac Ninh and might be home very late. I put on simple clothes, tied my hair low, wore a mask, and drove after him from a careful distance. My palms were slick with sweat even though the air conditioner was cold. Hong did not head toward Bac Ninh. He drove across the bridge into the urban neighborhood I had already narrowed down. His car disappeared into the underground garage of a mid-range apartment complex. Not luxurious, but clean and quiet. I parked at a cafe across the street and sat there for nearly an hour with my heart hanging by a thread. Then, just when I was close to giving up, the building doors opened. Hong walked out, not alone. Beside him was the woman I had seen on Facebook, Lynn. She wore a cream-colored knit top, her hair tied neatly back, carrying a little girl in her arms. A boy of about 7 ran ahead, laughing and calling, "Dad, hurry up." Just those 2 words made my whole body go numb. Hong turned and answered, "Slow down or you'll fall." His voice, the same voice I had heard for 8 years, softened into the voice of a father. He crouched down to adjust the boy's hat, then took the little girl from Lynn's arms. They walked toward the small park in the middle of the complex, looking exactly like an ordinary family. They were too ordinary, and that was the cruelest part. There was no cheap secrecy, no motel rooms, no thoughtless affair. He had built a real family. I sat frozen behind the glass. I used to think what I feared most was seeing my husband holding another woman. No, what killed me was seeing him hold a child, because in that moment, I understood that I had not only been betrayed in love, I had been robbed of a truth I had every right to know. Pushed into the role of the legal wife living in the dark while somewhere else he was playing the husband, the father, the devoted family man. I watched them buy ice cream for the children, laugh together, take pictures, and suddenly I remembered all the nights I had eaten alone, still believing my husband was working himself to the bone for our future. I wanted to run out and slap him in the middle of that park. I wanted to tear apart that perfect family scene. But I did not move. I forced myself to observe. They went back into the building around noon. I followed them into the lobby, pretending to be on the phone. I saw Lynn press the elevator button for the 12th floor. I noted the building number, the time, then went back to my car. My hands and feet were ice cold, but my mind had never been clearer. I had the address, I had the images, I had the dates, I had the truth, and I knew I would not forgive him. But before doing anything, I needed to understand the full extent of his double life. In the days that followed, I silently mapped out his schedule. I compared the dates he said he was traveling for work with the dates Lynn posted photos. Within a few weeks, I recognized the pattern. The first week of the month, he was home with me more often. The second week brought a 3-day business trip. The third week he disappeared over the weekend. The fourth week he reappeared steadily at home, as if to compensate. He split his time with precision, so chilling it made me sick. Even on holidays, he had a system. One year he spent time with one family first, the next year with the other, or he invented a work trip so he could divide a single day between us both. One year on Lunar New Year's Eve, he had dinner with me until 9. Then said he had to go by the office to check inventory. I waited for him until 1 in the morning before falling asleep. Looking back at a photo Lynn posted at 11:50 that night, I saw that coat, those shoulders, those hands holding a child beneath fireworks in the courtyard of the apartment complex. I do not know how a person can lie that intricately and still hold his head high every day like nothing is wrong. Maybe once you lie for long enough, you stop seeing it as lying and start seeing it as a skill. One afternoon, I left work early and went back to that apartment complex. I did not go upstairs. I sat at a tea stand near the gate, watching people come and go. Then I saw Lynn walking home with the children after school. She looked tired but gentle, just an ordinary woman. Not the kind you picture when you think of someone who steals another woman's husband. That made everything more complicated. If she had been a mistress who knew the truth, I could have hated her easily, but watching the little boy with his school bag chatter away while she tilted her head to listen, I had the unsettling sense that she too was living inside a story she believed was real. I followed them as far as the lobby, then stopped. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe I was still shaking too badly, but I could not bring myself to ring the bell that day. I went home. That evening, Hong lay beside me talking about the future, still discussing plans to visit his mother for longer in the summer if he had time. And I suddenly understood this. I could not confront him too soon. A liar that practiced would always have a way to twist things, deny everything, turn me into the paranoid wife, or beg just long enough to buy time. I needed the one thing he would never expect. I needed an ally. It took me 2 full days to decide whether I should contact Lynn. In my head, there were dozens of possible outcomes. She already knew and would laugh at me. She would call me the bitter old wife who could not keep her man. She would warn Hong, and then he would have time to move money, erase evidence, craft an even more elaborate story. But then I thought about the 2 children. I thought about the years of my own life, and I realized that if I stayed silent or handled this alone, he would most likely continue playing the victim over there. telling her I was cold, that our marriage had long been dead, and after a quiet divorce he would walk into his other home honorably, while I carried the humiliation alone. No, if he had used two women to build a double life, then those same two women would be the ones to tear it down. I created a new Facebook account with no photo and no identifying details, then sent Lynn a message. I need to speak to you about home. This is important. I am not trying to hurt you. I am only asking for 15 minutes. After sending it, I sat staring at the screen the way people wait for terrible medical results. No reply. 1 hour. 2. Near midnight she answered, "Who are you?" I typed and deleted a dozen times. At last I wrote, "I am Hong's legal wife." 3 minutes later she replied, "You've got the wrong person." I sent her a photo of my marriage certificate with Hong, hiding part of the personal information. 10 minutes later she wrote just one line, "That's impossible." I understood that sentence. That's impossible. I had said the same thing to my own screen a week earlier. I asked to meet in person at a crowded cafe in daylight, and told her she could bring someone with her if she wanted. She did not agree until the next morning. I arrived 20 minutes early. The cafe in the morning was filled with the sound of grinders, the smell of warm butter, soft piano music, all of it making everything feel even more unreal. Lynn walked in at 5 minutes to 9. She wore a white shirt, barely any makeup. Up close, she looked a few years younger than I had thought, but her eyes were heavy with exhaustion. She sat down across from me without greeting me, looking at me like I was a nightmare made flesh. I took my marriage certificate copy, wedding photos, and screenshots of messages between me and Hong from the exact days he had been with her, and placed them on the table. Her hands shook so badly it was visible. She kept shaking her head, tears immediately filling her eyes, though she fought to hold them back. In a very quiet voice she said, "He told me he'd been separated for a long time. He said the marriage only still existed on paper because they didn't have children, and he was waiting for the right time to settle it. He said he was afraid it would affect his job if it became public." I went silent for a few seconds because that hurt me in a different way. Not only had he lied to me, he had used my childlessness as part of the story that justified his affair. I drew in a breath and said, "He still lives with me. He has never been separated. He has never mentioned divorce." Lynn covered her mouth and burst into tears. Not the loud, dramatic kind that comes when the ground under your life is pulled away. That conversation lasted nearly 3 hours. Every sentence she said was another piece of the puzzle driven deeper into me. She met Hong 4 years earlier, when she was working as a receptionist at a dental clinic. He had been overseeing renovations nearby, started talking to her, pursued her. He told her he spent most of his time alone because his marriage was dead, that only financial responsibilities tied him to a difficult wife. He presented himself as lonely, mature, kind, always appearing at just the right moment when she needed help. When she got pregnant with their first child, he panicked at first and then turned joyful, saying the baby gave him the courage to finally end his old marriage. He rented the apartment for her. When she had their second child, he still promised that next year he would make things proper. Every year there was always another next year. Whenever she pushed him, he found another excuse. His elderly mother was unwell, his company was unstable, the property had not yet been divided, his wife was depressed. His wife threatened suicide. His wife refused to sign. I sat listening with my hands pressed so tightly into my lap they went numb. In the story he built for Lynn, I was an obstacle, a pitiable woman, and an excuse all at once. In the story he built for me, she did not even exist. He had not only betrayed us, he had designed both of our worlds with lies tailored to each woman's weakest wound. Lynn told me that once she wanted to take the children back to her hometown for a holiday, but Hong stopped her because he was afraid the old wife's family would find out. He did not allow her to post many clear photos of him. He would not let her come to his office. He never took her back to his hometown. Even when he was on real business trips, he still video called her faithfully. During the times he disappeared from her apartment for longer stretches, he told her he had to go deal with property matters. It was grotesquely ironic. Every strange thing in Lynn's life could be explained by my existence, and every strange thing in mine had been hidden by her existence. The two of us were two walls he built to keep each of us from seeing the other. She looked at me with swollen red eyes and asked, "When did you find out?" I answered, "A week ago." She nodded as tears fell onto her hands. "I feel so stupid." I looked at the woman sitting across from me, and suddenly I no longer felt any need to compete with her at all. Because in this, Both of us had already lost if we stayed on opposite sides. So I told her the truth. No, we were both deceived. The moment I said that, she cried even harder, and I, who had held myself together for days, finally cried too. From that moment on, something strange formed between us. Not friendship exactly, but an alliance born out of ruin. In the days that followed, we met several more times, always bringing evidence. I gave her property documents, joint bank statements, and fake business trip dates. She gave me screenshots of messages. A copy of the apartment lease with Hong listed as guarantor, hospital bills from the births signed by him as the father. Videos of him blowing out birthday candles with the children. The deeper we dug, the more horrifying it became. Hong used the same soft language with both of us. The same sleep well, the same don't think too much, the same leave everything to me, the same style of apology gifts, the same speeches about responsibility, sacrifice, and how men have to carry so much. Some of the messages were nearly identical, just with different names in place. I read a text he had sent Lynn the night she gave birth to their second child. "I'm sorry I can't stay by your side for long, but you and the baby are the most precious thing in my life." My blood turned cold, because just 2 days later he had come home, wrapped his arms around me in the kitchen and said, "No matter what, you'll always be the most important person to me." How many faces could one man have? Or maybe the truth was that he had none at all. We agreed on one thing. We would not alert him yet. Lynn was thinking of her children. I was thinking of the law. I found a lawyer through an old friend. Without telling the whole emotional story, I asked what the process looked like if a husband had another relationship, children outside the marriage, and signs of concealing shared assets. The lawyer advised me to gather as much as possible, stay calm, and not confront him until I had copied everything. I listened as if I were learning a new subject through my own wound. I began photocopying house papers, car documents, insurance contracts, bank statements. The main assets were our house and a plot of land on the outskirts of the city that we had bought 3 years earlier. Those exact 3 years overlapped with the time he started his other family. I did not rule out the possibility that money had already been siphoned away. I also asked a friend to check with Hong's company to see if there were any dependency declarations, insurance records, or forms linked to another household. Slowly, a clearer picture emerged. He had not only betrayed me emotionally, he had been calculating financially too. A husband who cheats may still try to defend himself as a man who made a mistake. A man who cheats, builds another home with shared money, and keeps 2 women living inside a lie is no longer making a mistake. He is running a system. About a month after I discovered everything, one evening Hong sat down beside me while I was folding clothes. He said he had felt me growing colder lately. I did not look up. He put a hand on my shoulder and said, "If you're tired because of the baby issue, then let's stop thinking about it. We can live like this. I only need you." I turned and looked at him. That face was the same face I had loved since I was 27. The same man who had stood beside me through my father's funeral. The same one who had stayed up all night with me after a minor surgery. That is exactly why it hurt. Real villains in life rarely look like villains. They still know how to cook you porridge when you're sick, tuck the blanket around you in the middle of the night, comfort your mother at a funeral. And at the same time, they can build an entire false world behind your back. In that moment, I understood that kindness is not enough to save someone from guilt if their core has already rotted. I asked him, "Do you ever feel tired of living your life?" Hong laughed, thinking I meant work. He leaned back in his chair. "Of course I'm tired. I'm a man after all. But it's fine. I keep going for the family." For which family exactly? The word family sounded cheap, coming out of his mouth. Lynn also started seeing the things she had once refused to see. She told me that ever since meeting me, every time Hong held the children, she no longer felt moved. She felt afraid. She realized he always controlled the story by giving just enough and hiding the rest. Once she asked him directly, "When are you finally going to bring me and the children into your life openly?" Hong put an arm around her and replied gently, "Don't push me right now. You know how hard this is for me." That answer used to make her soften. Now it left her empty. We both understood the same thing. This man existed by feeding on 2 things: women's patience and women's silence. So the only thing that could truly destroy him was if we stopped giving him both. The final plan came naturally after a short conversation with my lawyer. He asked me what I wanted most. I did not need to slap my husband in the street. I did not need a dramatic jealousy scene. I did not need to scream in front of our relatives. What I wanted most was for him to face the truth all at once, with no escape route, No time to prepare excuses, no chance to play one woman against the other. I wanted the moment his two worlds crashed together to happen right in front of him. Whole, cold, irreversible. And after that, everything would proceed through the law. Lynn was hesitant at first because of the children. We agreed the children would not be present. One Friday evening, Hong had planned dinner at Lynn's apartment because that weekend, he told me, he had to go to Hai Duong to meet a client. At the same time, he had told Lynn that this rare weekend he would finally be free from the other side, early enough to spend it fully with her and the kids. We chose that exact night. All day, I felt strangely calm. Maybe after too many sleepless nights, the body eventually enters a different kind of numbness. I wore a simple black dress, tied my hair neatly back, and put on just enough makeup not to look like a woman about to destroy her husband, but like someone about to sign a decision she had already made. In my bag were photocopies of property records, evidence of the affair, a preliminary divorce filing prepared by my lawyer, and a USB containing every screenshot. Lynn stayed inside the apartment and told Hong that the children were sleeping over at a friend's place because she wanted to have a quiet dinner alone with him. He must have been pleased. A man who lives two lives for that long starts to believe he is smarter than everyone else. I texted Lynn from the elevator, "I'm coming up." My heart was no longer pounding the way it had the first time I followed him. It beat heavily, steadily, like footsteps in a long hallway. The apartment door opened on the second ring. Hong stood there in a gray sweater, still holding a dish towel in one hand. He had probably assumed it was a food delivery. The moment he saw me, the color drained from his face so fast I almost felt like I could see it being pulled away. His eyes flew from my face to my shoulders, as if trying to confirm that I was really standing there. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Behind him, Lynn walked out from the kitchen, taking off her apron, and stopped still. The apartment sank into a strange, suffocating silence. I did not scream. I did not lunge at anyone. I simply asked in an almost ordinary voice, "Can I come in, husband?" The word husband in that room felt like a direct blow to his chest. Hong stepped back on instinct. I walked past him into the apartment. If anyone has ever wanted to know what it looks like when a liar is pinned between two truths standing on either side of him, it looked like that. He looked at me, then at Lynn, and it was as though he was trying to fit the pieces together inside his head, but could not do it fast enough. His face had gone ashy, his forehead damp. He started, but his voice failed him. Lynn looked at him with an expression I had never seen before on someone as gentle as her. It was not jealousy. It was not pain. It was contempt waking up. She asked, "How are you going to explain this? Who is she supposed to be? Or who am I supposed to be?" Hong reached out as if he wanted to touch her, but she stepped back. I set my bag of documents on the dining table and pulled out a chair. "Explain," I said. "Tonight, both your families are here." He started the way men like him always start when trapped. Deny whatever can still be denied, soften whatever cannot be denied, then beg for time before judgment comes. He turned to me. "Just listen to me first. It's not what you think," I laughed. "Not what I think. Then what is it? This is your home with her. Those are your children. These are the dates you told me you were on work trips. And I am your wife on paper. Which part am I getting wrong?" Then he turned to Lynn. "Stay calm, I was going to tell you. I just never found the right time." Lynn gave a bitter smile, her eyes reddening. 4 years wasn't the right time." He turned back to me, his voice dropping into a plea. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. At first I only meant to help her, and then things got out of hand." Hearing him reduce 3 years, 2 children, a home, support money, weekends together, to "things got out of hand" made my blood boil. I stood up for the first time since entering the apartment and said clearly, "No, you did not lose control. You built this brick by brick." Hong began to cry. Maybe that would have softened some people if they did not know him. But the tears of a man who has just lost control are not always sorrow. Sometimes they are only instinct. He said he had been under pressure, afraid of losing me because of the child issue, that he felt sorry for Lynn because she was vulnerable, that he did not know how to stop once she got pregnant, that he had planned to wait for the right time to arrange things so both sides would suffer less. Listening to him made me shiver. Every traitor likes to rename his cowardice, not knowing what to do. Meanwhile, I, the woman who slept beside him for 8 years, and Lynn, who had carried and delivered 2 children for him, had become 2 packets of damage he needed to manage. I asked him, In all those years, was there ever even one day when you intended to tell the truth? He did not answer right away, and that silence was fuller than any confession. Lynn took a stack of photos from her bag and threw them onto the table. Birthday photos, beach photos, hospital photos. I took out my own file and laid it beside hers. Marriage certificate, bank transfers, property papers. Hong looked at that pile of documents like a man watching the house he lives in begin to crack from the foundation. I said, from this point on, you don't need to tell stories anymore. Your job is to listen. My voice was so cold it surprised even me. I have already spoken with a lawyer. I am filing for divorce. I have backed up all evidence showing you maintained an extramarital relationship, had children outside the marriage, and used shared finances to support that relationship. If you think you can hide or move assets, try it. Hong opened his mouth to say something, but I raised my hand to stop him. As for Lynn, I turned toward her. If she chooses, she can demand that you fulfill your obligations to your children through the law. No more begging, no more waiting on promises. Lynn stood by the table, her back straight, her eyes no longer belonging to a woman who still believed. She nodded. Then Hong got angry. Maybe when he saw that tears were useless, he snapped back into his real instinct. You two are blowing this way out of proportion, he hissed. I haven't abandoned anyone. I've still been taking care of both sides. This could have been handled privately. Why drag it into legal matters? That sentence killed the very last thing I still had left for him. Privately, I repeated, you call 8 years of a fake marriage, 3 years of maintaining a second family, taking shared money to support your mistress, deceiving 2 women and 2 children a private matter. Lynn looked at him like he was a stranger and said, softly but like a blade, you didn't take care of anyone. You only took care of yourself. That hit him harder than any scream. Hong sank into a chair, his head in his hands. For the first time since any of this began, he no longer looked like a man in control of anything. We did not stay long. The point was not to argue all night. The point was to make sure he saw that the curtain had been ripped down and would never be hung again. Before leaving, I placed a copy of the notice my lawyer had drafted in front of him, ending cohabitation and warning against disposal of shared assets. I said, tomorrow I'm moving back to my mother's place for a while. My lawyer will be in touch. Don't call me to beg, and don't threaten me. I have enough evidence to make you pay for this. Lynn also said she would take the children to her parents' house for the time being, and would not let him near them until everything was clarified. Hong looked up, his eyes red and wild, and asked me, do you really want to destroy everything like this? I looked him straight in the eye. You are the one who destroyed everything. I'm just the one cleaning up the wreckage. Then I turned and walked out. That night, when I stepped outside the building, I lifted my face to the dark sky framed by rows of glowing windows. I did not feel victorious the way people often imagine. All I felt was a vast hollow space, the kind that comes when nerves stretched for weeks are finally cut loose. I stood there on the cold pavement for a very long time. Lynn stood beside me without speaking. We did not hug. We did not swear we would be sisters forever. We did not turn our pain into some cinematic moment. We simply stood there like 2 people who had just walked out of the same fire, our clothes still carrying the smoke. Before getting into her car, she said, "Thank you for telling me." I answered, "Thank you for not turning around and hating me." She nodded, eyes red but steady. I should have known sooner, but late is still better than never. Yes, late is still better than never. Some truths arrive late, but at least they arrive before an entire life is buried under the lie. The weeks that followed were a battlefield, legally and emotionally. Hong called more times than I could count, sent more messages than I bothered to read. At first it was apologies, pleas to meet. Then came the blame shifting. Pressure, circumstances, loneliness, even me, because I had been too focused on work and the infertility issue, and that had left him emotionally worn out. I read that message and felt like I was watching a snake shed its skin in front of me. When I did not reply, he started reaching out to both our families, trying to build the image of a man who had made a mistake but was still responsible. But evidence is very hard to defeat with performance. My lawyer filed the petition with copies of financial records showing unusual transfers, evidence of the long-term extramarital relationship, and clear documentation of the parallel household. At the same time, Lynn also began formal steps to secure legal recognition and support for the children. She was not trying to win a man. She wanted her children protected by the law. I respected her for that. Both families were shocked. My mother cried until she had no tears left, asking why her daughter had to suffer like this. My mother-in-law nearly fainted when she learned that her son had 2 children outside the marriage. She called me, crying, begging me to think again because men make mistakes sometimes. I had once cared deeply for her, and maybe that was exactly why those words felt so cold. I answered very calmly. If it had only been one moment of betrayal, maybe it could be called a mistake. But 3 years, 2 children, 2 homes, shared money, 2 women living inside lies, that is not weakness. That is a way of life. She stayed silent for a very long time, then hung up. I knew that with those words, I was ending more than a marriage. I was cutting away many things I had once cherished. But there are prices you pay to keep your dignity. I could not continue being the woman everyone advised to endure quietly, just because the truth would embarrass other people. Hong tried every possible delay. He proposed a private settlement. He suggested, "Let me take care of you financially and don't make this bigger than it needs to be." He asked for a quiet separation so he could preserve his image at work. He even met with my best friend and said he still loved me, that Lynn had just been a long drawn-out mistake because children were involved, that what he really wanted was to come back to his legal family. But the absurd thing was that at the same time, he was telling Lynn that if she left him, he would lose his reason to live because of the children. A man who lies that habitually forgets that once exposed, all his words start turning against each other. I handed every one of those messages to my lawyer. I did not need to hear another explanation. Love cannot simultaneously serve as a mitigating factor for betrayal. The first mediation session took place in a cold room under fluorescent lights. Not dramatic like a movie, but carrying a pressure that was worse. Hong came in carefully disheveled, hollow-eyed, unshaven, as if he wanted everyone there to believe he was suffering horribly. I sat across from him in a white shirt with my back straight. My lawyer laid everything out clearly. Violation of marital fidelity, long-term use of shared property and funds for a separate relationship, and serious harm caused to the marriage. Hong kept his head down, occasionally sighing, occasionally looking at me as though hoping I might still soften. But something inside me had changed shape. It was no longer rage burning hot. It was ice. At that session, when the discussion turned to the land, he argued that he had contributed the larger part of the money, and therefore the division should reflect that. My lawyer immediately presented proof of transfers I had made from my own savings, both before and during the marriage, to help purchase it. I watched Hong's face change color. He must have forgotten that the woman he took for gentle and trusting was also an accountant, someone who keeps every document. Men who betray often confuse silence with stupidity. As for Lynn, I was not deeply involved in her legal process, but I knew she did not back down either. She demanded legal recognition of paternity, proper child support, and enforceable obligations. Once illusion dies, women often become far clearer than men. Hong found himself trapped on 2 fronts of his own making. His work life began to crack too. I did not set out to destroy his career, but his company found out soon enough through his absences, the pressure, and the fact that relatives never keep quiet for long. A regional manager built on an image of reliability and stability does not remain untouched once it becomes known that he has lived a secret double life with hidden financial obligations. He was demoted, then took leave. When I heard about it, I felt neither joy nor pity, only rightness. Some people think betrayal is only a private issue. It isn't. The way a person treats the people closest to them reveals exactly how they understand responsibility, trust, and boundary. Ruin in a private life is not always separate from character in the world. During the waiting period, I moved back in with my mother for a few months. My old room was still there, with the study desk, little floral curtains, and the comforting scent of old wood. On the first night sleeping there again, listening to the fan turn in the dark, I felt like someone who had fallen from a building and survived. My mother did not ask many questions. She just made soup, peeled fruit, and left a glass of milk by my bed the way she used to when I was young. Some nights I woke from dreams where Hong walked in through the door with the same familiar face and the same familiar voice, asking me why I had made such a huge mess out of everything. I would wake up sweating, sit in the dark, and remind myself I did not make it bigger than it was. I simply stopped shrinking my pain so it could fit neatly inside someone else's selfishness. That sentence carried me through many nights. I also began therapy after my best friend practically forced me to go. At first, I thought I did not need it. I was still going to work, still eating, still sleeping. I had not collapsed completely, but in the very first session, when the therapist asked, "What hurts the most?" I burst into tears. Not because he had slept with someone else, not because he had children outside the marriage. What hurt most was realizing that the person I had trusted most had looked straight into my eyes and chosen to lie. Every day, deliberately. The deepest betrayal is not sex. It is when someone takes your trust and uses it as a tool. The therapist told me something I still remember. You are not hurting because you were foolish. You are hurting because you were sincere and the other person exploited that. Hearing that, for the first time in a long while, I stopped feeling ashamed of having believed. A lot of people asked me whether I hated Lynn. That question alone reveals how deeply people are still trained to place women against each other, even when a man is clearly the center of the lie. No, I did not hate her. There were rare moments when it stung to think that she had been given something I never was. Children. But that feeling was never enough to turn her into my enemy, because she too had been deceived by a story written specifically for her own emptiness. She needed a place to belong, and he played the role of belonging. I needed a faithful husband, and he played the role of faithfulness. Each woman was handed a mask and told it was a face. The truth is, if we had fought each other the way people always expect women to, the only winner would have been him. The fact that we did not do that was probably his bitterest failure. The day the divorce was finalized, a light rain was falling. There was no scene in the hallway, no one collapsing, no sad soundtrack. Just stamps, signatures, and cold declarations. I walked out with a folder of papers in my hand, and the strange feeling that I had lost a huge part of my life and reclaimed myself at the same time. The asset division did not make me rich, but it was fair enough that I did not walk away empty after 8 years of marriage. The house was appraised and handled according to our legal shares. The land outside, the city was divided according to documented contribution. More importantly, nothing remained in the gray blur Hong had wanted. The law, even if it cannot heal a heart, still has one strange power. It names things for what they are. I was no longer the wife deceived in the dark. I was the woman who walked away with documents, evidence, and clarity. And Hong, in the end, became exactly what the title of his own tragedy demanded. A man who lost almost everything. He lost the marriage he wanted to keep as a safe foundation. He lost the image of a decent husband. He lost the peace of the second apartment because Lynn no longer believed in him. He lost money because he could no longer keep manipulating by word alone. He lost even the right to present himself as the victim. And the striking thing is that he did not lose everything in a single night. He lost it piece by piece, the exact same way he had built it. One layer peeling away to expose the next, one door closing to reveal the emptiness behind it. Once after the divorce, he sent me one final message. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I truly never wanted to hurt you. I looked at that line for a long time and then deleted, because there are kinds of pain that do not come from sudden cruelty, but from sustained selfishness. And they are not lighter just because the person who caused them says they never meant for it to happen. A year later, I still live alone. My new apartment is smaller than the old house, but every object in it is something I chose myself. There is a wooden table by the window, a few green plants, a low bookshelf, a set of pale gray bedding. The first evenings there felt empty. I would hear traffic outside, watch the city light flicker across the ceiling, and feel as though my life was a plot of land just cleared after demolition, dust still hanging in the air. But over time, that emptiness changed meaning. It stopped being loss. It became space for truth to enter. I learned how to eat dinner alone without feeling abandoned. Learned how to spend money on a short trip without asking anyone's opinion. Learned how to sleep through the night without waiting for the sound of keys outside the door. I also learned to look back at myself not as the victim of a failed marriage, but as someone who survived a carefully constructed lie. Sometimes Facebook still suggests people I may know. Every time that section appears, I still feel something strange slide down my spine. One meaningless suggestion once brought down the entire life I thought I had. But I no longer hate that moment, because if I'm honest, the thing that shattered me was never Facebook, never the algorithm. It was the truth. And the truth, however strangely it arrives, is still better than spending a whole life inside a lie you never get to see. I used to think that discovery was the darkest day of my life. Later, I understood it was also the day I was saved. Saved from growing old beside a man who was never really standing on my side. Saved from continuing to doubt myself. Saved from the role of understanding wife that society loves to hand women so they can suffer more gracefully. If you ask what remains after all of this, it is not innocent trust. That is gone, but what replaced it is better. The ability to look straight at things, to look straight at cracks instead of covering them with cloth, to look straight at lies instead of asking them to soften so I can sleep, to look straight at my own worth without needing anyone else to confirm it. I am no longer the woman who sat trembling in front of a screen that night, seeing her husband's face in another family's photo. That woman died the same night. The woman who rose from the ashes was someone else, more wounded, sharper, and no longer waiting for permission to protect herself. And if I had to tell this story on YouTube, in front of thousands of strangers, there is only one thing I would want to say clearly in the end. The most frightening kind of betrayal is not when a man has another woman. It is when he turns the sincerity of two women into the tool that feeds his lie. My husband had a secret family for 3 years, and I found out because of a Facebook suggestion. It sounds like a modern twist, too dramatic to be real. But the part truly worth remembering is not the discovery. It is what came after. I did not attack the other woman. I did not claw at her hair. I did not let him stand between us and keep playing the wounded man. I contacted her. We put the truth on the table, and on the night we both appeared in front of him at once, for the first time in his life, that man had to look at the full consequence of himself in a single frame. After that came divorce, legal filings, asset division, obligations, collapse. He lost his safe house. He lost his secret family. He lost money. He lost his image. He lost the right to direct the lives of women from the shadows. He lost everything, and I, after losing 8 years of marriage, ended up reclaiming the one thing that mattered most: myself. And believe me, for men who live by deception, that is the ending that hurts the most.